Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sanctuary for All talk on the Sermon on the Mount. My name is Ryan, and I'm very grateful and humbled to be able to bring these messages to you that Jesus gave to us and to share with you some of the things in them that are just profound. And each and every section has its own importance to it, which is why I'm breaking them up into pieces because there has been throughout history so much just not understood about the words that are said, and definitions have changed, things have changed, our ideas have changed, what is acceptable and not acceptable has changed, and sometimes we forget what the actual meaning to these words of Jesus were intended for. And oddly enough, that's precisely what he's doing in the Sermon on the Mount, is restoring everything back to its original intent. And this time, we are on the next passage of Matthew chapter 5, verse 31 and 32, which is specifically the passages about divorce and sexual immorality and the covenant of faithfulness. And so this is the third time we hear him say, "You have heard it said, but I tell you." And he does this 6 times. So let's get to the passage here. We just got finished doing the one on lust and adultery and what those means. And, Jesus in his wisdom prefaced that before he got to divorce and sexual immorality, because, and I'll answer that when we get into what the culture was then and what Jewish law was at the time that he was addressing to all those people. So the passage itself in Matthew 5 is, "Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery." So, this is a big thing for us to go over here. So first of all, let's kind of define a couple of different things about what marriage actually is and why it is so separated and it's unique in all the relationships found throughout the Bible. And one of the reasons why God himself uses the concept of marriage to Jesus, to the church. So marriage is actually described as a covenant, not merely a bond. Like in Malachi chapter 2, verse 14, he explicitly calls marriage the covenant of your God. Marriage is also the only one flesh union, and that took place in Genesis 2:24. This language of one flesh union is never used in any other relationships, only a husband and wife. And roughly it means a shared life, a shared authority, a shared future, a shared spiritual identity. There's also a divine witness and participant in marriage. In a marriage, God is the third party to the covenant, and that's, of course, Malachi chapter 2:14. And breaking the marriage covenant is not just against a spouse, it is against the God who witnessed and joined them. Marriage is a symbol of God's relationship with his people. In the Old Testament, God was the husband to Israel, it was the bride. So in the New Testament, Christ is the bridegroom and the church is the bride. So marriage becomes the only human covenant that mirrors salvation in history. And also, marriage was a form of mutual possession. Like in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3 through 5, Paul says, "A husband's body is not his own, and the wife's body is not her own." So it's not ownership, it's mutual self-offering. And a covenant, roughly defined, is just a sacred binding union where God is a participant in that covenant. Malachi 2:14 says, "She is your wife by covenant." So marriage is the earthly reflection of God's faithfulness. And that's why it's important. And that faithfulness is that it's a covenant of presence, a covenant of care, a covenant of protection, a covenant of faithfulness, and a covenant of mutual belonging. So marriage is unique among all relationships because only marriage creates a new shared identity. Only marriage joins two into one flesh. Only marriage mirrors heaven and earth, the union. Only marriage carries sacrificial responsibilities, and only marriage requires mutual bodily belonging. So one of the things that we could probably go over here, which I think would be important, is what the traditions were, that the crowd, what they understood, the majority of the crowd being, of course, of Israel, what they understood, what laws they were, going by, what the roles of a husband and wife were at the time. And this is what Jesus is starting to address. So, according to the Torah and Jewish law back then, the husband had certain responsibilities. A Jewish husband was bound to three non-negotiable obligations, and that's found in Exodus 21, verse 10. He was bound to provide food, clothing, and marital rights, which specifically means sexual affection and union. Failing these could legally justify divorce for the wife. In addition, in Deuteronomy 24, verse 5, a newly married man must stay home for a year to bring happiness to his wife, is the quote. And in Proverbs 5, it says, celebrate her beauty, rejoice in her, and be faithful. So he must protect also her reputation. Public shaming or false accusations were severely punished, and that's found in Deuteronomy 22. And he must also financially secure her. Back then, they kind of had a marriage contract that guaranteed support if he died or divorced her. So he was bound to care for her in one way or the other. So the wife also had responsibilities. A Jewish wife was expected to support the household economy. So she did food preparation, she did fabric production, she was the children's early educator, and she managed servants if they were wealthy. She was also bound to honor and support her husband. Honor included fidelity, managing the household well, participating in family worship, and shaping the spiritual life of the children. And the wife was also seen as the guardian of the household's moral and spiritual center. Back then, also, too, sexual norms were not the same for men and women. And this is where, Jesus addressed this before in the lust section. So for a wife, sexual immorality was adultery. That threatened the husband's lineage, the paternity of their children. It was a covenant breaker. But for the husband, he was forbidden from committing adultery with another man's wife. But intercourse with an unmarried woman was not technically adultery in Jewish law unless it violated some other covenant. And that's a huge thing that Jesus is attacking here in the first part about lust, when he said, but I say to you, if anyone looks upon another woman with lust, to lust after her, you have committed adultery. So he's correcting this error of thought and reason in Jewish law. He attacks that asymmetry by calling lust equally sinful, saying remarriage after wrongful divorce makes the man an adulterer, and this is leveling the playing field morally and spiritually. And Paul, adds to this. He's not inventing new things about marriage. He's adding to it. When he says things like, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and wives submit, and husbands sacrifice. And of course, he went on to say that the husband's body is not his own, and the wife's body is not her own. So he's not reinventing the marriage ethics. He's correcting cultural imbalances, equalizing authority, restoring mutuality, and infusing the covenant with Christ-like love, bringing the one flesh model to its spiritual fullness. Paul rehumanized and re-equalized marriage inside the patriarchal world of their day that they were up against. And so one of the things that Jesus was directly confronting here was the misuse of Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 through 4. In his day, some rabbis allowed divorce for almost any reason. Things like, even if she burned the meal. My wife burned the meal, I need a divorce. Rabbis debated acceptable reasons for divorce. They felt it was, up to them to decide, and they kept coming up with different things that worked and didn't work, or that they approved of or didn't approve of. Jesus is trying to strip away all these loopholes and reset marriage to its covenant intention, which took place all the way back in Genesis, which it's a covenant created before the fall of man, which is very important. So it's one of the oldest covenants that there is. So some of the background on the misuse here. The Pharisees and scribes anchored divorce to Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 through 4, that if a man finds some uncleanness in his wife. And so two major schools developed from that. There was the Shammai, which they called uncleanness sexual immorality only, and the Hillel, which called uncleanness almost anything, even trivial offenses like burning the food. And so the Hillel became very popular because it turned divorce into an escape clause. You can get out of a marriage for any reason whatsoever. But in all this, Jesus is not actually abolishing the laws of Moses. He's correcting the corrupt interpretation and returning marriage to God's original design, as he later explains in Matthew 19. Why is he doing this? Because Jesus is trying to protect the vulnerable. Women in the first century Israel were often left destitute after divorce. By restricting divorce, Jesus is protecting women, stopping men from passing them around, and restoring dignity to marriage. The teaching does not condemn divorce. It actually frees the wounded, and we will get to that because we're going to define sexual immorality with using the exact words that Jesus used, or that at least is in our New Testament in the Greek. Many people have carried shame for divorce. And so, I know scores of people who believe that they broke something, they got divorced, and, there was no adultery involved, but they got divorced, and of course, then they find Christ, or they find God, or they restart their life in building a relationship with God, and they get hung up on, oh, I'm a bad person. Should I go back to my first husband? Should I go back to my first wife? What have I done? Because I divorced them and there was no adultery involved. But we're going to get into that because, like I said, I need to define some words here for you. But to lead off, many people have carried shame for divorces that were actually the result of covenant breaking done against them. Jesus is not condemning people. He's naming the sin for what it is. It's a violation of the one flesh covenant by the one who harmed, neglected, or abused. So abandoned spouses are not guilty. Abused spouses did not break the covenant. Those who escaped harm are not condemned by God, and Jesus does not bind people to covenant destroyers. But what he's trying to address here immediately with the crowd is that divorce is just never paperwork. See, because the culture treated it that way at the time. They treated it very lightly because a certificate made it legal. And Jesus teaches that legality does not equal righteousness. Divorce wounds the covenant, identity, and community. And Jesus is trying to expose the real issue here, that divorce is not an administrative act. It is the tearing of a covenant. And why adultery? Why did he say, well, if you've done this, you're an adulterer? In that culture, a divorced woman almost always remarried to survive. So a frivolous divorce forced her into a situation where she would be considered adulterous according to societal norms, even though she was actually innocent. And so Jesus is condemning the system that punished the vulnerable while excusing the powerful. He's condemning the trivial divorces, the selfish divorces, the any cause divorces, the legal loopholes to discard a spouse, divorce rooted in hardness of heart, and divorce as a power over the vulnerable. And what you'll see when you truly understand what sexual immorality included, it becomes very clear that actually he's defending the abandoned. He's defending the abused and the betrayed and the neglected and the endangered and those whose covenant was broken against them. So let's get into that part, because that's the part that is really illuminating from the standpoint of marriage and divorce. Because, a lot of people are in marriages and they believe they're stuck there in a bad marriage with an abusive partner or with a neglectful partner, or, and they think, well, I have to stay with them because otherwise I'm a sinner. So one thing we need to understand is that, of course, in English, the word is sexual immorality, but in the Greek, which is a fixed language, the definitions of the words in Greek are very, very specific, and they don't change. Sexual immorality, the word used in Greek was porneia, which, of course, is where we get the word pornography. And that's the only exception that Jesus gave, was for sexual immorality, or porneia, which is the word he used. But even then, this was an allowance. It wasn't a command. You don't have to divorce somebody if they've committed sexual immorality, and we'll get into that towards the end about Jesus's covenant to us, because reconciliation is still part of the heart of God. But Jesus acknowledges that betrayal can break covenant in unique ways. So this exception clause, sexual immorality, is actually unique among sins because it breaks the one flesh union. And you can confirm that in 1 Corinthians 6:16 through 18. Jesus does not command divorce here. He permits it because betrayal destroys trust in a way other sins do not. The exception is given out of mercy, not legalism. The warning here is the hardness of the heart. Matthew 19, Jesus says Moses permitted divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. Hardness breaks covenant. Love restores covenant. So this is the big part here. Sexual immorality, or porneia, uniquely defined, never meant only adultery. Not in the Hebrew law, not in Jesus' usage, and not in the Second Temple Jewish context. It always meant the same thing. The word for sexual immorality refers to a category of covenant-breaking behaviors, not a single act, not just adultery. Porneia is any action that violates the covenant integrity of the marriage, whether sexual, relational, spiritual, or violent. This is extremely important. It's critical. Adultery is only one expression of porneia, not the definition of it. So in the Old Testament, sexual sin often meant treating the covenant wrongfully, not just infidelity. I'm going to give you some examples because, like I said, this has been a huge argument, contention point. To this day, there's still scribes and Pharisees deciding whether somebody has the right to get divorced or not, and making it a whole legal thing and telling you you're good or bad if you do or don't. But let's go with what Jesus Christ said about, hey, if there is porneia, if there's sexual immorality, you can be released from the marriage, and it is not a sin. And like I said, it isn't just infidelity. So Exodus 21:10 through 11, if a husband deprives, neglects, abandons, fails to provide, or treats his wife harmfully, he has broken the covenant. She is released from the marriage covenant. Released means the covenant is terminated. And that's in the Torah. This is not about sexual acts. It's about covenant infidelity. Deuteronomy 22 and 24. Sexual sin is tied to violation of the wife's dignity, false accusations, harm, exploitation, or degrading treatment. And of course, that goes both ways because Jesus, and of course even Paul, equalized everything about how we are supposed to love and respect each other, because this is an example of God's love for all of us, and how he elevates us even to his level with him, to be co-inheritors, to call us the bride of himself. This is how we're supposed to treat our mates, in the same exact way, whether we're male or female, whether we're the husband or the wife in the relationship. But all of those acts are seen as covenant-breaking behaviors, and none of them are sex acts. Yet all are treated as violations of sexual fidelity because they violate the one flesh covenant. Jewish law explicitly held that abuse breaks the covenant. This is not a modern interpretation. It is actually part of the ancient. The marriage contract listed husband's obligations like food, clothing, marital affection, protection, household peace. If he violated these, especially through violence or cruelty, The wife had every legal right to a divorce. In many Jewish communities, the rabbis ruled that a man who strikes his wife causes her to be released. Violence was considered a covenant-breaking sin. And, yes, it did fall under the category of porneia, because porneia is about misusing the marriage covenant, not merely sexuality. So, what are some of the things that porneia includes? Well, of course, sexual infidelity, but also emotional infidelity, covenant betrayal, abandonment, violence, dishonoring behavior, and degrading one's spouse, treating them as property, and any form of exploitation, because all of these desecrate the one flesh covenant. And that is something that we have to take a serious look at. We live in a world today where one sex believes they're superior to the other, and the other sex believes they're superior to the other, and we see people mistreating each other in public, and they're married. We see people putting each other down, their spouses down, in public, and they're married. They're breaking the marriage contract, or the covenant. They're breaking the one body thing. They have already abandoned emotionally, in protection and care and love and understanding and forgiveness, the person that they're with. And under what Jesus said, porneia, that is a justifiable reason to divorce a person in your life that you're married to. So we as a people need to perpetually kind of inventory our own behavior towards our spouses. Am I treating them with respect? Do I talk bad about my wife or my husband to other people? Do I honor them and protect them, or do I mistreat them? Do I ignore them when they're at home, or don't care about their lives? Or do I involve myself? Do I love them as God loved us and as Jesus loves the whole world and came to save the whole world? Are we taking on the role of protecting and guarding our marriage, which is unique among all other relationships, the most important one? It's the only relationship where God himself binds the covenant. He doesn't even bind the covenant between parent and child, but he binds the covenant himself between husband and wife, because it is the greatest example of our union to himself, to God itself. And so anything that degrades or demolishes or arrogantly destroys the one flesh covenant between a husband and wife fits under the category of porneia. And Paul himself explicitly expands porneia to include harmful, degrading, or exploitive behavior. So he addressed this himself. Mutual bodily belonging is sacrificial. It's never coercive. If one spouse exploits the other's body, that's a covenant breaker. Ephesians 5, a husband must love his wife as Christ loved the church. That means to be gentle, protective, sacrificial, nourishing, cherishing of them, forgiving of them. Paul contrasts this with harshness, domination, exploitation, and harm. And he calls anything else works of darkness, which obviously does not make a marriage. A marriage is not a work of darkness. So anything that is along the lines of domination, exploitation, harshness, harm, correcting them, scolding them, physically abusing them, pushing them around, treating them badly, those are all works of darkness. They are not justifiable. It's not justifiable to look at your husband and go, well, he's just so stupid, I have to control and run everything around here. That is a work of darkness. That is an arrogant, bitter, hardened heart of hubris. And it is not of love, it is not of Jesus, and it is not of God. And likewise, husbands that look at your wives as though they're property or somebody that, you just use for your sexual pleasure, or somebody who's supposed to just run the household and do everything you command. It's the same thing. You are not treating your wife as an equal, as a partner, as someone that you are in love with and want to support. Our jobs in a marriage is not to get from the other person. Our job is to be like God and to give to the other person, whether we're the man or the wife or the male or the female, or whatever the condition may be, our job is to give and to support and to love and to help. There are scriptural support that abuse breaks covenants in the Old and New Testament. Exodus 21, 10 through 11. Neglect dissolves covenant. If one party is neglectful, the covenant is dissolved. Malachi 2, 14. God witnesses abuse. In Deuteronomy 22, harm equals covenant violation. In rabbinic tradition, violence equals a release. And Paul directly says that harshness, being harsh with your mate, contradicts Christ. A covenant of faithfulness is one that reflects God's own faithfulness. So what Christ is saying here is not about punishing people. It's about honoring the nature of God and the gift of marriage and the union that we have. Because Jesus keeps a covenant even when we break it. So Christ and the church being the model of marriage, marriage uniquely mirrors God's covenant to his people. Once again, another relationship that is unique. There's a marriage between God's covenant and his people. No other human relationship is used as the template for this. God's relationship to Israel, Hosea, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Christ's relationship to the church in Ephesians 5, Revelations 19. God never says, I am a friend to Israel like David and Jonathan, or I'm a father to Israel like Abraham. He says, I am a leader to Israel like Moses. What he says in Isaiah 54:5 is, I am your husband. In Hosea 2, 19 through 20, he said, I betrothed you to me. Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Ephesians 5:25. Marriage is the only human institution that God uses as a prophetic symbol of his love. This alone puts marriage in a category that nothing else shares. And marriage is the only relationship that God himself explicitly joins together. He doesn't join together two business partners. And Jesus says, what God has joined together, let no man separate. And he says that in Matthew 19:6. So God does not join together friends, parents and children, teammates, ministers, partners, tribes or nations or business partners. God joins a husband and wife together, a marriage together. But when two people enter a marriage, God says, I join you, I unite you, I fuse you. Marriage is not simply a human covenant. It is a divine act. Like I said, it's an example of his covenant to us that we can take all the way back to Abraham, and we'll get to that. God is the one who binds us. This gives marriage a sacred ontological reality that other relationships simply do not have. In Ephesians 5:25 through 33, marriage mirrors Christ and the church, sacrificial love, mutual belonging, nourishment, cherishing, gentle leadership, and humble submission from both parties. The husband is called to love as Christ loved the church. And what does Christ's love look like? Well, Christ's love is sacrificial. It's protective. It's self-giving. It's elevating. It's never cruel. It's never coercive. It's never violent. And it's covenant-keeping even unto death. Jesus kept his covenant unto death. And that takes us back to, where did this begin? The covenant with Abraham in Genesis 15. So, God and Abraham were making a covenant. God would be his people, or his people would be with God, and God would be, Abraham and his seed would be his people, and they would be his God. And so they did kind of the normal thing that they did back then, which was they would sacrifice an animal, split it in two, and when a covenant was made, both parties would walk between the blood, and basically to say that if I break this covenant, let happen to me what happened to this animal. But what was very interesting is that when God and Abraham made this covenant, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and God alone himself, in a pillar of fire, I think it was, or a torch, went in between the animal. So God walked through the pieces alone, meaning that if this covenant breaks, I myself will bear the cost. And Jesus himself paid the cost of the covenants broken between God and us. And that's one of the things that he came to correct. And while he was here, was to pay the cost of the breaking of that covenant himself. And marriage points to that truth also. Covenant love lays itself down. It doesn't tear the other person down. We seek where the other person is right. We listen to what they're saying. We accept that even if they're experiencing something that isn't true or real, it is true or real to them. They're really feeling that. They're really experiencing that. Do we help them or don't we? When a child is scared of something that isn't actually scary, but they're scared, what do? We pick them up and we hold them. We don't curse them out as though, what are you, stupid? That's just a whatever. Don't be scared of that. That's abuse. It's also abuse when we do that to an adult. So when we look at another adult and we expect them to understand something the way we do, and then we hold them accountable to that, and we punish them for not doing that, we're being abusive. And in a marriage, that form of perception and behavior is covenant breaking. We're breaking the one flesh. We're treating our own flesh as stupid. And men and women both do this. And we have to take a good look at that how we actually treat our mate and how we look upon them. And we have to find where they are intelligent, where they are strong, where they are wise, where they are creative and curious, instead of where they are wrong, where they're not listening, where they don't care. Our job is not to be the judge of our mate. Our job is to be their savior, both sides. Our job is to be their protector, their caregiver, their supporter, to love one another, to actually want union with each other, not to use sex as a way to get something or to take sex away as a way to punish. But to get, Christ is trying to get us back to the original thing. Because, there's even a passage where in the Old Testament when a woman came back into the camp after her time. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Her and her husband should join together quickly, lest the devil get in between them. So intimacy and sex is actually a way to get over our angers and our fears and our resentments towards the other person. It actually helps restore reality to our physical body and restore our own minds and our own thoughts and our own intent. So when we withhold intimacy because we're angry with somebody, we're making matters worse. That's the beam in our eye that we're looking at the speck in theirs. What we're doing is actually ensuring the failure of a relationship. Rather than saying, I'm feeling distant from you today, let's do something together. Let's go have a picnic. Let's hold each other's hands. Will you sit on the couch and just kiss me for a while? To get close to each other, intimacy actually restores love, and the sin that we were angry about or whatever gets answered by love. Love answers that. Jesus is the faithful husband even when we were unfaithful. This becomes the living model of how spouses should treat each other. Because, of course, our spouses are going to make mistakes. They're going to do dumb things. They're going to, at times, be angry with us. We're going to have arguments and fights. But it's very, very important we quickly get back to an equality and a mutuality and a respect for the other person. Marriage is supposed to reflect God's kind of faithfulness. Faithfulness that bears the cost instead of shifting it. Well, you're the one who did that, so I'm not going to pay for that, or, and of course we're talking emotionally or spiritually, and maybe even sometimes physically. It's also supposed to be a faithfulness that protects rather than discards or judges or, looks for reasons why it's wrong. Faithfulness that mirrors the God who keeps a covenant even when we didn't. So, as we see by understanding porneia and all these abuses, Jesus is actually protecting the vulnerable. He's not saying, well, you just need to be stuck in this marriage because they haven't cheated on you. They've cheated on you if they're abusive to you. Women in the first century Israel were often left destitute. So Jesus is protecting women in this whole thing. He does not condemn those of us who are divorced. I have been divorced myself. Many people have carried shame for divorces. And that was actually and the divorce itself was a covenant. They have every reason why they should have been divorced. And Jesus is not condemning them. He's naming the sin for what it is, porneia, the violation of the one flesh covenant by the one who harmed. And, this, like I said, is extremely important that we keep this in mind and we understand this concept. I myself have been divorced. I was an adulterer in that relationship. I don't even know if she was or not, because I had to clean up my side of the street and I had to deal with my actions and my behavior. But by the definition of porneia, there were lots of other reasons why our covenant was broken. And when I look at my part in that, I was neglectful. I abandoned, the wife that I had. Today, I really have to take a look at those kind of things on a daily basis. It's a part of our daily living. How can I be supportive today of the marriage I have now, which thankfully, my wife and I just celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary yesterday. So this is a perfect timing for this. And in a perfect timing, once again, for me to go over these things, not to look at where possibly my wife may be failing me, but where I'm failing the relationship itself. And the beautiful thing is, what that Jesus also taught us is the whole concept of forgiveness. Now, of course, we don't need to just keep forgiving somebody who's abusing us. But the point is that power and that authority is up to you. You get to decide whether what's going on in your marriage is something that you're able to forgive and to restore the balance yourself of respecting the other person. And there are behaviors, of course, where that respect can pretty much never be re-earned. And nobody would understand that. No pastor would understand that. No, even our friends. They can only have a relative understanding. But we're the ones who are experiencing it directly. So we need to truly understand that sexual immorality was anything that broke the one flesh covenant. And all those abuses and disrespect, that's a breaking of the one flesh covenant. Our husbands and our wives are not lesser than us. They are equal to us. And matter of fact, we're supposed to uphold them and raise them up. And, as a wonderful, glorious thing in our life, as Christ held up the church as a wonderful and glorious thing in his life, and how he loved us and wanted to save us and forgave us of all the things we did and paid for that price himself. Your husband is going to make mistakes that you have to pay for. He came home with the wrong thing from the grocery store. Now you got to go to the grocery store. Do you hold that against him? Or do you treat him like Christ did? Your wife is going to make mistakes that you may go, oh, how did she not know that? And you're going to have to go fix it. Are you going to scold her and look at her like she's stupid? Are you going to love her and care for her like Christ has loved and cared for us and accepted us? Or are you going to say, hey, that's okay, honey. I'll take care of it. I'll do it. I'd be glad to do it. Why should you struggle with something you don't know how to do when I know how to do it? If you want my help, I'm right here. I will do it for you. Once again, it's not about coercion. We don't force ourselves upon another human being. God doesn't force himself upon us. He gives us a choice, life or death. You can choose to follow me, or you can choose not to. It's up to you. And the same is true in a marriage. We don't coerce people into loving us. They either love us or they don't, and they decide to love us or they decide not to love us. What matters is our part. What are we doing in the marriage? What are we doing in the relationship? Are we honorable today? Are we working towards being honorable today? If we're struggling with something, we can get help. We can go to couples therapy. We can go to a friend and say, hey, I'm just having a hard time treating my wife the way I need to. And this is my ideal. This is how I wish to be, and I'm having a struggle with it. And your friend most oftentimes will have had the same types of issues in his own life, and together you both can help support each other into being stronger and greater and more supportive men to your wives, because you're sharing something honestly that you're struggling with, and then you can take that before God. It's not hidden whatsoever. And you can also amend things with your spouse and say, hey, I haven't been treating you right lately. I've been neglecting you all week. You've shown me your new hair and your new dress, and I just went, that's nice. Those aren't the things we did when we first met them. When we first met them, we noticed everything about them because we wanted to be in love. So if we're struggling doing those things now, it's because somewhere along the line, we wanted to judge them instead. We stopped wanting to be in love, and instead we wanted to play God and be superior and to judge the other person, whether they're good enough or not. And that is a breaking of the covenant, because we've replaced God in the covenant with ourselves. So it's very important that we look upon our mates with love and respect and integrity and honesty as the beautiful gem they were the day we wanted to be with them. Now, of course, that doesn't include those who are covenant breakers, who are abusive to us, who mistreat us, all that. But it is up to you to decide whether it's something that you can forgive, because there are levels to all this stuff. People go through difficult things in their life. People go through times where they're struggling and they're just snappy at everybody. That's not a reason to just go, oh, well, I'm out of here. It's up to you to decide, hey, and maybe you can find a way to be supportive yourself and say, what's going on? How can I help? You seem like you're really struggling, and you're being mean to me too. And if they get snappy at that, I'm not being mean. You could say, well, I'm not trying to start a fight here. I just want to be close to you and to be supportive of you. And I know I'm not doing a good job at it, but my desire is there. Whatever it takes. See, the whole point is our heart changes. The attitude changes. When we stop playing God and stop playing judge, and instead protect the other person as though they are us, everything changes. How would you want your life to be? Be that way for them. Give them everything you want in life. You want to be hugged a lot? Hug them a lot. You want to be touched a lot? Touch them a lot. You want to be kissed a lot? Kiss them a lot. You want to be complimented a lot? Compliment them a lot. What's the saying in the Bible? He who seeks friends should be friendly. Go find them. Be the thing that you want, and then you'll have the thing you want, because it is you, instead of you seeking something as though you don't have it. God's way empowers us to realize we already have the things we want. It is ours to give, and by giving it, we ourselves enjoy it and are a part of it. There are so many examples of that in psychology and everything else. It's like, if you go to a wedding where you barely know anybody there and you just feel awkward and all that. If you ask, hey, how can I help? Can I set up some chairs? Can I do whatever? And they go, oh yeah, we could certainly use help. Go, please set up these chairs. As soon as you set up all those chairs and stuff, now you feel a part of the wedding itself. You've supported it. You've helped put it together. You no longer feel awkward. That is how this kind of spiritual wisdom works. When I want a hug, I go hug my wife. And while I'm hugging her, she's hugging me and I'm getting a hug. I don't sit there going, well, she never hugs me. Why doesn't she ever hug me? I need a hug. She doesn't notice I'm not hugging, That's insanity. That's judgment. That's condemnation. That's arrogance. And that's pride. And it is works of darkness, according to Paul. We don't have to be without. We can tell our mates or give to our mates the very things we want. Those are ways we can be Christ-like in our own marriage. He gave us everlasting life because that's what He is. That's what He has. And He wanted us to have it. We have the ability to love our mates. At one point, we did. Fully. We have the ability to uphold them in public. We have the ability to treat them with care and respect and honor because we have done so. And we can always do better, and God will always show us how to do better if we submit all things to Him and submit to God and bring these troubles to God and say, hey, this is where I'm struggling. Help me to be a good husband. Help me to be a good wife. I want my man to feel secure in us. I want him to feel like he's loved and he's desired and he's wanted. And I want my wife to feel like she's beautiful and she's the jewel in my eye. And I love the things that she shares with me and her creativity and all those other kind of things. We have had those feelings, and we're supposed to have those feelings all the time. And we have those feelings by being close. Anger, troubles, problems, they're designed by darkness to try and separate us, to get us to not want. But that will only give us less, and it'll give us more to not want. And then we will suddenly be people who don't want the things that are natural to us to want, that we actually do want, but now we have this whole layer of reasons and feelings and intellect, that's all BS. Because deep down inside, we still want to be loved and close to someone, and we still want to love someone and be close to them, and have them be close to us. And we always will. Bitterness is the proof. If it wasn't for being bitter, if somebody actually didn't want to be, they're not bitter about it. They enjoy being alone. Oh, I'm a hermit and I love it. They're not bitter and nobody loved them. Bitterness is because they wanted somebody to love them and nobody did, or they loved and nobody accepted it. But marriage is the greatest union of all. It's the example on earth of our relationship to God in heaven, in the kingdom of God. And it is powerful. And we have things today that can help us with any issue along these lines. There is so much support and help we can get. But, like I said, if you're in a position where you don't feel you will ever be loved, respected, honored, cherished, or any of those things that fit under what porneia is. See, even in the old Jewish laws, it was all sorts of legal stuff like you must provide money and you must provide food. And Jesus brought it to the actual meaning once again, in the Garden of Eden when God brought Adam and Eve together and made them one flesh together and gave them that gift, that it's about that which harms or breaks the covenant. Not having food, not having money sometimes, that doesn't break the covenant. That's man's reasoning and uh, about physical things. Divorce is about the spiritual, the ongoing, the everlasting, the bond, the covenant, the one flesh idea of one body, one spirit, one mind. And so any party in that is perpetually abusive to it and has no intention of ever repairing the damage they're doing, matter of fact, they justify it, that's not a marriage. That's a broken covenant. And I hope people who have either been divorced and have shamed themselves have found some freedom in that, in understanding that, oh, yes, it was good. It was right that they left. They're not adulterers by getting remarried. The other person broke the covenant. You just acknowledged it through the divorce. And likewise, those who are married and feel stuck and they're married in an abusive relationship, this is some information about what was actually said by Jesus Christ as to what is sexual immorality. And it's defined as sexual because it's the one flesh union. But the sexual immorality is porneia, is anything that is abusive, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, without the ability to repair it. And ultimately, only each individual knows whether they're going through something like that or not. And our job when we have friends who may be going through divorce is not to try to force them together and reconcile, but to be supportive of them because we don't actually know what it was they were going through. And it's not for us to judge a divorced person or not. That is all between them and God. And so, whether our churches have people who are divorced, remarried, and stuff like that, our opinions do not matter. God's opinion is the only one that matters, and He made it crystal clear that we are not to be harmed. We're not to have our covenant broken. We're not to have ourselves broken, our bodies broken, our minds broken, our emotions broken, our spirits broken. We are meant to be restored, uplifted, made whole, made stronger, made greater, made healthier, made lovelier, made more beautiful by the marriage that we have. And our job is to try and provide those things to it. And hopefully, the mate we're with will likewise wish to do that with us. And then we create not only a new life, like a child, but a new life emotionally, a new life intellectually, a new life creatively, and a new life spiritually, unlike anything we could have ever imagined. Because of the honesty that I was able to have. See, the wife I have today, I knew her for quite a long time as just a friend. We didn't flirt, just a friend. And because of that, I actually built a friendship, an open one, an honest one, where I got to talk to her about who and what I actually was and the things I actually, just like I would any other buddy. And then when we got together, nothing was hidden. Nothing was hidden. And she knows who I am, where I came from, all the darkness of my past, every horrible, terrible thing that I had done, and everything that I did overcome. And same with her. I know all about her life. And those things, instead of each other looking at each other like, wow, what a defect you were back then, those things have actually endeared us to one another. I understand today some of the protections and care and understanding that she may require that is a little bit different than others because of things she's been through in her life. And she understands that also with me. And we can find each other acceptable and honorable in ways that nobody else could. And a new life and a new perspective and a new reality got created out of that I could never have imagined in a intimate relationship with anybody. Because before that, I was just selfish and self-centered. I never actually learned to love and respect somebody in an honest and truthful way. But God gives us the ability to do these things if we truly want it. If we want to be a good husband, if we want to be a good wife, continually ask God to show you how to do that and how to love and support your marriage. And if you're being abused, find your way out, because they've broken the covenant. You are free. You don't deserve that. What you deserve is the same thing that Christ gave to us. Now, we are humans. We're all going to make mistakes. And, my wife and I probably have to forgive each other every day about stuff. But it just happens because we understand, and we're humans and we're struggling. And any one of us can say, "Hey, what's going on?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I need to work on that. I need to, my attitude's bad today. I'm sorry, And we acknowledge our own faults, and then it can actually be even funny. That's the power of God's way. It makes a way through things that formerly seemed impossible, too dark, and too difficult to understand or to bear. And at times, they can just actually be funny. And we can laugh at each other and be like kids. So I hope this was helpful to someone. That was the whole thing about what Jesus said about divorce and sexual immorality. And I'm very grateful, again, like I said, to be able to discuss these things with all of you, because the Sermon on the Mount is just the greatest sermon ever given to us. And it itself has been misread and misused to justify all sorts of things that are not godly, actually the opposite of what he's saying. And I wanted to make clear what Jesus was saying here in this, how he was trying to restore the beautiful and the original idea found in the story of Adam and Eve, that it wasn't good for us to be alone, that we can be with someone else and share life and share all the wonderful things. And that is the covenant, and that is the marriage, because that is God's love and intent when in consideration of us and in our lives. Thank you for allowing me to share. I look forward to doing the next piece of the Sermon on the Mount very shortly. I guess I'm getting to about one a week, but we will talk soon. Thank you.